Hey guys, how you doing? And welcome back to another video. So in today's readings, we see a common theme of the cross. So Prophet Isaiah speaks about, this servant that is to suffer. Then St. Paul, in his letter to the Hebrews, talks about how Christ, was tempted in every way to sympathize, with our weaknesses. And then Jesus himself, in today's gospel, talks about how he has to give up his life, as a ransom, for all. And so in all three of these readings, we see a common theme, and that is the cross. And so we all know when we speak about the cross, we're speaking about Jesus crucified, and, very basic understanding of why Jesus died on the cross is to forgive sins. But I want to explore this more because the cross actually, it's a lot more deeper than just the forgiveness of sins. It is our very salvation, and it is an essential part of our identity as Christians and our journey to salvation. And so there's two areas which I want to speak about in regards to the cross, and that is the cross being a light, and how through the cross, Jesus and us, we come into common grounds with Jesus. So I'll explain that a bit more. So how is the cross a light for our lives? Well, Prophet Isaiah says something very important. He says that out of his anguish he shall see light. He shall find satisfaction through his knowledge. The righteous one, my servant, shall make many righteous, and he shall bear their iniquities. And so first of all, this light that comes from Christ, this light that comes from the cross, is a light that makes us righteous because it points to God. It points to God himself, who is righteous itself. And so when we are, living in the darkness of our lives, that light which shines from the cross brings a transformation in our lives, and it helps us look towards God. And as we look towards God, God forms our hearts, he forms our minds, he forms us as human beings, and we become the people who God created us to be. And that comes from the light of the cross. So in other words, this cross, the cross of Christ crucified, has transformation power because of the light that comes from it. And this light is what brings us, towards the heart of God. And I read a story, I watched a documentary actually not too long ago about a sister, an Irish sister called Sister Claire Crockett. And she has an amazing story. So she was, before her conversion, she was just, a teenager that, had a very social life. She would party a lot and things like that. And, but then one day, she went to mass as normal. And then there was, I think it was like a Good Friday service. And as she was processing towards this wooden cross in which the priest was holding, she kissed the cross. And at that moment, she says, everything had just transformed at that moment. Everything had just changed in her life. So that cross that she encountered was a very personal cross. It wasn't, she wasn't just kissing a wooden cross, but it was as if she was kissing Christ himself on the cross. And that itself transformed her life completely to a point where she even then pursued religious life. And so that itself is a prime example of how the light that is emitted from the cross of Christ has the power to completely transform the way we live our lives, completely transform the culture, of our very own life. So as I mentioned already, St. Paul talks about Jesus as a high priest who was tempted in every way to sympathize with our weaknesses. And then of course Jesus himself says that he must give up his life as a ransom for many. And so we have a God who is not a God that is far off, but a God that is very close to us. And I remember one day I went to a school for some school outreach with a priest, and we were given small reflections for each year 7 class. And in one of the reflections, we basically said that Jesus is not a God, that is distant from us, but he's a God that wants to come close to us. And when we mentioned this, about 2 students in this class started crying bitterly, and they actually left the classroom. And then when the teacher asked, how they were doing, if they're okay, they said, I never knew Jesus was this close to us. I never knew that Jesus, loves us this much. And, she said, I love, how Jesus is like this. And she couldn't control her emotions. She was so overwhelmed by just acknowledging how close Jesus is and how much he really loves us. And this echoes what Saint Paul says when Jesus, was tempted in every way to sympathize with our sufferings. Jesus was crucified on the cross. He went through so much pain, not just to forgive our sins, but so that we can know that he understands how we feel. He understands the pain that we feel. Jesus was rejected, and so he understands how it feels when we are rejected. Jesus, was abused, on the cross. He was spat on the cross. He was hit, so he understands how it feels when, it sometimes feels like the whole world is against us. And that is why, we say, give it all to Jesus, not just for the sake of it, but because he truly knows where you're coming from. There's no one in this world that will be able to understand you just as much as Jesus can. Even with our own family and friends, we can say stuff, we can say how we're feeling, but they won't truly understand us completely to the level that Jesus can. And when we offer up all our hurt to Jesus, Jesus takes it upon himself, and he gives us healing. So the cross, as well as being a common ground in which Jesus and us are one, in which Jesus' sufferings is united to ours, it is also a ground where we can receive healing. And so, my dear friends, I just want to remind you these two aspects of the cross for this week. That the cross is a light for our lives, in which it points us towards the love of God, in which we are called to have an intimate relationship with him. And secondly, the cross is a common ground in which Christ's suffering is united to ours, and it is a ground where through the cross we receive healing. So thank you so much, guys, for listening. I hope you have a great week ahead. God bless.